Hello everyone, Rebecca here, and in this video I'm going to review the book 100-Day Pantry by Jan Jackson. Now the basic premise of this book is to purchase the items that you need to have one meal every day for 100 days, and the meal is dinner. It's a main meal of the day. And another interesting thing about this book is that it has everything that you need for the meal can be stored in your pantry. And generally speaking, they have a shelf life of 2 years or more, the foods that you would be storing. So that's the basic idea. And interestingly enough, even things like water, you don't even need water. If you're cooking rice, like in this case, the grains and pasta, 1 1/4 cups rice, you don't even need any liquid to cook the rice because you use the liquid that's in the canned goods to cook the rice. So no need for you to have water on hand even to prepare these meals. Also, the idea behind this book is that a lot of people buy all kinds of things for their pantry, their prepper pantry. They buy all kinds of canned goods, and they buy pasta, and they buy, beans and rice and this and that and the other thing. And yet they have no idea what to do with it. So if there was some kind of emergency, you'd be sitting there, okay, I've got all this food, what do I cook? And this takes it to a different level because you could say, well, today I'm going to make chicken Creole as an example, and you're going to know you have all the stuff on hand to prepare that particular meal. So it's a very, very practical thing. Before I go further, I want to just look through the table of contents and kind of show you what types of recipes there are. So she's broken them down into chicken, veggies, so there's some vegetarian meals, beef, fish, and ham and bacon. And then she has just a very couple of things that are just for fun, so, cookies and that type of thing. She also gives some tips on organizing your pantry. So let's go ahead and look at page 167 to see that. And she talks about how to track the foods that you have and that type of thing. Now I want to look at one of the recipes, and I just opened this up at random, and talk about how I would maybe adapt it. So you'll notice that this has 6 ounces of noodles, and it has dried onions and all these canned goods: chicken broth, chicken gravy, green beans, pimentos, processed cheese, and so on. What I like in this book is it shows for everyday meals, omit the broth, cook the noodles in water, and replace dried onions with 1/2 cup of fresh. So you can be using these recipes without using, let's say, all of your dried goods, like your dried onion. You can actually save those. You can, obviously use them if you want, but you can save those for a time when it's a true emergency. But there's one change that I would make. If on everyday meals it says omit broth, then probably what I would do is, in place of, like in this case, 1 14-ounce can of chicken broth, I would have a bottle of water. Because if you don't really need the broth for the recipe, then why not just use water? Because generally speaking, the broth would have a lot of sodium and things like that. And you'll notice that in here, there's plenty of other things to give it flavor. There's canned chicken, chicken gravy, you got the pimento, you got cheese, you got parsley, flakes, and pepper, you have onions, and so on. So there's plenty of things to replace the broth with. Now, in other cases, I've seen where she says omit 1 can of broth. Maybe there's 2 cans of broth in the recipe. So if that was the case, I would make sure to have a bottle of water on hand to replace 1 can of the broth, and go ahead and buy another can of broth for making that meal. What the author, Jan Jackson, goes out of her way to do, and I think it's really smart, is for the most part, the recipes in this book, the items that are needed, have a shelf life of 2 years or longer. And the goal is to, when you're not in an emergency situation, to make 1 meal a week from your pepper pantry. If you have the ingredients on hand for 100 days and you make one meal a week from the pantry, then basically it would take you 2 years to go through the ingredients that you bought to make these meals. And the items that you have would not expire in that 2-year period of time. And because of that, you would be consistently rotating the stuff that you have in your pantry. And it would never go bad, at least in theory. That's kind of the basic idea there. Now, needless to say, you would replace the items as well. So if you used, let's say you use this can of chicken and chicken broth, tomato sauce, corn, processed cheese, all of that, the next time that you go to the store, you would make sure and buy more. So that's generally how this would work. So another tip that she has that I think is really a great tip is to try out a recipe once. Instead of just going and buying a bunch of ingredients, try it out once. And if you and your family really like it, then buy the ingredients to make it 3 times. So you're not necessarily going to have the ingredients on hand to make, let's say, 100 different individual unique recipes. You would maybe pick 10 recipes that you really like or 15 recipes that you really like. You could do 30 recipes you really like and plan to have each of them 3 times. Now that would obviously only be 90 meals, not 100. But the basic idea is to test out these recipes. Just don't go and buy a bunch of stuff to make something several times. Try it once, and if it's a winner, if it's a big hit, then you want to buy the ingredients to make it multiple times. So I think that is a really great tip as well. And she also says there's 2 very basic approaches to organizing your pantry. You can store by the food type with all the green beans together and all the mushroom soup together, or you can store by the meal with all the makings for one type of meal together. So I think that that's kind of an interesting thing that I think a lot of us haven't necessarily thought of, is having all of the items, let's say, in a tote for a week's worth of meals. And you could just grab that tote and that you have everything that you need to make meals for that week. So this could be a really good approach for if you're thinking about having to evacuate your home for some reason and wanting to have the food that you need. You could have at least one tote that has food in it that you could make all of the meals that you need for that week in that one tote. So what I see as the great value of this book is that it gives you a plan. It gives you a way to use all of that food that you have in your pantry. It helps you to be more purposeful in your shopping so that, again, you're not just looking at this pantry full of food and wondering what in the world am I going to do with it. You could plan out what meal from the pantry you're going to make this week and know that you have everything on hand to make that. So all in all, I think that this is a great book. A lot of people criticize because, obviously it's using all this canned stuff. There's a lot of sodium and things like that. But again, this is for ease of use, and this is also something that can prepare you for an emergency, knowing that you have everything on hand to make the meals. I recommend this book as a jumping off point because once that you get the hang of making the meals that are in this particular cookbook, this particular book, which is in a sense a cookbook, you can then look at other meals and that maybe your family likes and think about how can I do this same type of thing? What things would I need that are shelf stable to make that meal? And I'll give you an example. I like making this chicken pot pie from shelf stable stuff. Canned chicken, canned green beans, cream of chicken soup, and the Bisquick cheese and garlic biscuit mix is what I use for the top. And so since I already know that my family likes that, I can add that to the list, not just depend on things that are in this book, but add that recipe to my list of things that I want to make sure and have on hand. Another thing that I would do is I would incorporate, since I do canning, I would incorporate home canned products in the book. So I would, let's say, have some, maybe a pot roast meal in a quart jar that I would put into the rotation. I would have a bean soup or a chili or sloppy joes or things like that that are not in here, but that can kind of use the same idea to where I add them to the rotation and I make a point of eating them, you know, one day a week. I pull something from my pantry to prepare a meal one day a week, whether that's a home canned item or it's something using, you know, canned goods like this. So I hope that you found this helpful. If you did, I will definitely be reviewing other books in the future. So be sure and like this video and subscribe so you'll be notified when I create more videos. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.